So I'd love to start the conversation with your time at LinkedIn. You joined LinkedIn in 2008 to run marketing for LinkedIn Talent Solutions. And from what I remember, it was a really fast-growing social network, but there wasn't much of a business model. I'd love to know what made you join LinkedIn, and can you kind of paint a picture of what LinkedIn was like when you joined?
Yeah. So there was a business model, a very clear one, actually. And surprisingly, years later, when Reid Hoffman got awarded I think the award of Entrepreneur of the Year at HBS, they showed his initial business plan. It was incredible how right he was. The only thing he got wrong, it was just 1 year off. But he saw, so we, there were three business lines that were monetizing on top of the social network. But at the time when LinkedIn was 350 people, probably total revenue or bookings AR of close to 90 million. And the business lines were the premium accounts, the advertising business, and then the recruiting solutions business. And the first one, the larger one, was the premium account. Marketing solutions that we thought was going to be the largest business, and talent solutions that are recruiting solutions was the one I joined. 2.5 people marketing that, about $20 million of AR, 10 sales reps. We thought was just going to be the smallest. It turns out that he accelerated. It was right on for recruiters, and we were at the right time at the right place. Even though joining there in December 2008, I got really scared because that was right after the beginning of the financial crisis. And the first thing that gets cut is recruiting. The second thing that gets cut in marketing. And I thought, why did I just join? And luckily, when you have a disruptive service like this, which allows you to save money on other recruiting spend, that was right. So very, very strong and fast growing network and clear idea, but we needed to build a lot of stuff.
And so you joined, and it was just 2.5 people, 20 million ARR. What did those early days look like building it up from scratch? Today everyone uses LinkedIn for recruiting, but when you joined, that wasn't quite the case. And so I'd love to know, how did you think about kind of positioning the product? How are you able to convince recruiters to actually use LinkedIn?
Yeah. So we didn't convince them to use LinkedIn. Our job was to convince them to use the LinkedIn premium services, recruiting services, because the network itself, through the word of mouth, through network effects, was recruiting recruiters who are creating their profiles. So the job was to figure out which organizations have recruiters there and really showing them why they needed our suite of solutions. And so the positioning was you need to go from, this is not a great way to put it, but to a glorified job poster, resume screener, and interview scheduler to being a lot more strategic and do what we called and explained to be passive candidate recruiting. You build your brand, you source people, you source the right one, you put your jobs in front of the right ones, and you go from really being relying on luck and what was called to spray and post, or post and spray, and really become a strategic function. So we give them the tools, the data, and mostly the inspiration from the best, borrowing a lot from what the headhunting firms do and the internal search teams do to show them what's possible. And the suite of tools was increase and better sourcing with what's called LinkedIn Recruiter, job post on the network, and solutions to help build your employer brand reputation, company profiles, and things like that.
And so it sounds like there's a lot of product marketing work to figure out, okay, what is the positioning? How do you think about this pitch to the recruiters, and changing the way recruiters work from kind of, just the posting or job postings on the internet to actually having a more proactive approach to recruiting. But when it comes to, so I assume there's a lot of education stuff you kind of put out into the market. But once you put out that education, was it mainly inbound, where recruiters just coming to you saying, oh, I'm interested and bought into that messaging? Or did you have to do more outbound and kind of go out to them and say, hey, recruiter, you need to change the way you're doing things right now?
We did both. So first, with a network like that, and then when you have so many free or self-serve premium recruiters, we wanted to make sure they could find we advertised on the network a little bit. We had some product integrations pointing them to our corporate pages. But in terms of outbound, we did a lot of education events, in-person webcasts, and that later grew into a conference. But the conference, we can talk about that later, was mostly for customers. And the events were, especially we grew a program that initially tested in 3 markets where simply for 3 hours, we get people in a larger meeting room up to anywhere between 30 to 120. We'd organize a panel with our most innovative customers, those who had been experimenting, innovating with LinkedIn, would just share how they were using social media in general to recruit. Turns out it was mostly around LinkedIn, of course. And then we invited people to come to those webcasts or in person simply because we had the email addresses and the contacts on LinkedIn. And they were just listening to the most innovative and progressive customers. And at some point, they wanted to know, well, of course, people were talking about how they were using LinkedIn for more strategic recruiting, because that's exactly who we selected. And then we went into a product demo. And so the outbound was working. So that outbound was working so well. After I started with 3 of those meetings, we ended up running 130 a year in the world of that. And same thing in webcast. And then, of course, all the right content, emails, we come up and wrote recruiting trends initially for the US, and then took that to many countries. And that was more content, webcast, etc. So it was a lot of a classic demand gen type of and content-based outbound based on education.
But I think what's super interesting, what you're saying there, is you sort of use the voice of the customer and understood, okay, how are they using LinkedIn really successfully? And then mirrored that back to other recruiters to say, hey, look, this recruiter's using LinkedIn really well. You should use it in this way too. And that sort of compounded over time. And then you obviously had the added benefit of an amazing brand and the network effects that you could do to kind of recruit more people.
Big time. So we're especially, and this is where having a sales team in multiple regions helped, because they were building those relationships and we were tapping them big time as a marketing team. Hey, who in your region is strategic? Who should we know? What do they do right? And this is why also we started some customer advisory boards with them. But the beauty, I didn't realize it at the time, of doing these city-based events, and every time just sweating through who do we invite, and those that were sharing the right stories. They didn't have to be stories about LinkedIn, but strategic recruiting. We made sure we're staying very close to them, thanking them, sending them gifts, keeping them in our ecosystem. And then they upgraded later to also become the keynote speakers, the webcast speakers, our ambassadors, etc. That was essential.
No, it's amazing. It reminds me of what I did a little bit at Lattice, thanks to your help with like the resources for humans stuff. No, it's a really
Same thing.
powerful playbook of just this like kind of grassroots, from events and community organizing things, and then showing that all back to the customers and kind of your next the next round of buyers, if you will.